Patsy's illness, according to one knowledgeable insider, was complicated by the fact that implants from a breast augmentation early in her marriage ruptured and needed additional surgery. Judith Phillips was distressed to learn that her very ill friend was flying back and forth across the country by herself, sick as a dog, vomiting. Where the heck was John? Following her recovery, she celebrated by having a partial facelift. As she was being fingerprinted, she became hysterical, saying, "Why are you doing this? Do you think I killed my baby?" This is the first point where we see that Fleet and John are having a problem. Ramsey told his lawyers and the DA that he regarded Fleet White as a prime suspect in JonBenet's murder. Okay, so previously we were exploring different parts of the Vanity Fair article. We've looked at several pieces. In between this, we looked at the Jane Scobie. We looked at the Lisa Gibbons. We've looked at Geraldo Rivera. We've looked at Steve Thomas. We've looked at Fleet and Priscilla White's letter. We've looked at Judith Phillips' letter, all in effort to validate. And we've seen some testimony, or not testimony, but some words from Jane Scobie and Dan Marino. We've read some Dan Marino. I don't know why I keep thinking of Dan Marino, but Jim Marino, one of John Ramsey's friends, Jane Scobie, one of John Ramsey's former employees who moved to Atlanta and later claims that she fired some, Nidra and Polly Paul, later known as Polly Davis, Patsy Ramsey's mom and sister. So basically what we've been doing is we've just kind of, in a way, been working to validate the findings in this article, because if we can, and this article in specific is called Missing Innocence, written by Ann Louise Bardach. And so we kind of broken it down into several parts. We've gone through like 3 parts of it already. We're in part 4 or 5. And so essentially, there are a lot of nuggets in this article. And what we were doing was validating the research of Ann Louise Bardach to make sure that when we read this stuff, we can trust what she's saying and that she's actually accurately reporting. And so we're going to jump into this and kind of continue to work through. For the sake of time, I have a lecture in just a few minutes. I say a few minutes, but I have a lecture, so I'll probably try to keep my comments brief in terms of going back and referencing or showing the references. I might just reference them, and I'll try to be as clear as I can in terms of those references. So here we go. From the magazine, Vanity Fair, October 1997 issue, October 1, 1997, by Ann Louise Bardach. JonBenét Ramsey, Missing Innocence. To gain some insight into the pageant world, I went to the Little Miss Hawaii Tropic Pageant in Denver in June, held in one of the banquet rooms of the Red Lion Hotel. A small stage and runway, decorated in purple turquoise and green tinsel palm trees, took up almost half of the room. About 50 moms, many of them seriously overweight, and a scattering of men watched as girls from infants to teenagers, several of whom had competed against JonBenet, paraded before the judges. In an adjoining banquet room, the girls changed from costume to costume from the various events: swimwear, formal wear, sportswear. Anxious mothers fussed over them, spraying their hair, lavishing their makeup on their faces, and whispering tips and encouragement. Some of the women, incensed over the bad press pageants have been getting, sought to disabuse me of the lies you may have read. Others simply confirmed the criticism. JonBenet wanted to do it. She loved it, insisted Pam Paw. JonBenet would have done the pageant every day if Patsy had let her. I was speaking to somebody, I think from Australia, in the comments, and they were just kind of mentioning like, hey, we don't really have, kind of talking about growing up or being an adult and having kids around this time in 96 and stuff like that. And they were kind of like, hey, we really didn't have pageants in Australia like that. So this was kind of a foreign concept to kind of see, Americans running around doing something like this. And especially with their kids, maybe obviously adults, it's one thing, but with their kids is quite another. And so, I found it quite interesting because it's good to get perspectives from different parts of the world and stuff like that. And even in the US, obviously, as you see that it's kind of, hotly debated. And I say that because sometimes you can be stuck in your own little bubble, and some people agree with it or some people don't. Some people. I guess my perspective on it is that sometimes you have to remember that these are kids. I don't have a problem with putting kids in talent shows and maybe even pageants and stuff like that. Because I see kids in dance, dance classes all the time, and dancing dolls, and they, and all such as that, and they have to wear heavy makeup. Where I grew up, they have a studio for that, and the young ladies are kind of raised into that, and they're like really prepping them for high school and stuff like that, and later cheerleading and stuff like that. And so I guess I've kind of seen that in a form. Maybe we didn't call it pageants, but we called it something like drill team or something like that for little kids. I think it was more so along the lines of not really, showcasing the kids. I don't think I've seen the kids formal pageants, but I guess I did see sort of like some of the dance studios for, some of the young ladies to go get training, some of the young girls to go get training. I did see a studio for that. And I guess every now and again, I'm not sure I ever attended formally something like that. But I feel like I knew it existed in some way, shape, or form. I guess I feel like so. I guess it's not completely out of the sphere of possibilities. And obviously, as Patsy was saying, she sees it as just something to get JonBenet involved in and stuff like that. So I understand that. But what did I guess what I don't like is, these are still kids. And, just for me personally, and and I'm not trying to project this on anyone else. I think when I was looking at the, it's not the cowboy sweetheart outfit, but I think it was like the Miss America looking outfit where she was in like this, American hat and like this American, leotard, I guess that's like, putting kids in bathing suits and stuff like that. But I guess being at the pool, maybe I think of that as two different things. These kids are going swimming, but to parade them around, we're not parading them around at the pool. And there's also always an element of sort of different levels of appropriateness, I guess. So I guess for me, it's kind of hard to kind of see, JonBenet just kind of parading around. I'm not trying to say anything in terms of John and Patsy being bad parents in that regard. It's just, would I have done that if I were a parent? Probably not to that extent. Maybe the cowboy sweetheart outfit is fine, but maybe the more leotard like outfits I may have steered clear from, just because that's a personal preference of mine. But anyways, back to the video. But Patsy said no. Church comes first on Sunday, and the other days we'll do pageants or whatever. But wouldn't we, mother and aunt, former Miss America contestants, be doing less than we should if we didn't get her ready, get her dressed, and have her look her most exquisite? Right. JonBenet's former nanny recalls otherwise. She would say to me, "I don't want to walk down the runway. It scares me." She liked to perform, but didn't want to have to compete. The pageant videos of JonBenet strutting seductively down runways, which were played ceaselessly on television, scandalized many viewers who were unaware that child pageants even existed. Right. JonBenet has been variously described as looking like a 6-year-old Lolita, a pint-sized kitten, and a daddy's little, well, you know. And so, like, when I was reading that, like, I obviously, you guys know me. I kind of blur out some words or self-censor some words, just because it's just like, you know, but the idea is that, just some very inappropriate stuff about kids and whatnot. So, and I understand what Pam is saying. We would be, we would be wrong if, uh, we didn't get JonBenet ready for something that she wants to do. But I guess when we were doing our analysis of JonBenet, when we were kind of looking at her face, and we were trying to analyze and assess, and sometimes, of course, this is speculative, but sometimes when you look and you look at people's face, um, you're trying to ascertain whether or not there's a real interest. And what's being said here is that there is a love for performing or entertaining, maybe, but performing in this way. I like to do it in front of my parents and friends, but to be put on a big stage, maybe that's not something I want to do all the time. Maybe there are anxieties and pressures associated with that for JonBenet that she was not able to communicate to Patsy and John. And so I think that's the biggest concern, because I was noting in one of my video analysis that, she kind of looked like it was a performance. She didn't necessarily look, and I can't say that she didn't enjoy the performance, but she didn't necessarily look like she was just gung ho after having finished. And that's all I was saying. So, I mean, it could be something, could be nothing, but those are things that you just kind of pay attention to in behavioral analysis and body language. Her mock vamping has been called kitty inappropriate pictures. The Ramseys were flabbergasted at the outrage over JonBenet's pageant photos and videos. At the Ramseys' May 1 press conference, Patsy minimized her daughter's pageant life as just a few Sunday afternoons. But Marilyn Van Der Adler, a former Miss America who has gone public with her story of incest, says, "That's when I knew this woman was in serious denial." Yeah. Pageant life is full time. Yeah. There are dance teachers and singing teachers and costume fittings, rehearsals, makeup, and hair. It's not a hobby. Yeah, because it's just like when you think about the pageant life, and particularly in JonBenet Ramsey's case, because JonBenet Ramsey is coming from a long line of people who have been in the pageant life, right? They're coming from a long line of people who have done that. Nidra Paul said the pageant life is a way, and I'm paraphrasing in a sense, the pageant life is a way for me to get my kids, to success. And so you're coming through Patsy Ramsey, you're coming through Pam Paul. I don't know, and I'm still kind of lost on if Polly did it, but now you have JonBenet, who's jumping into sort of this pageant line of just like a family business at this point, I guess, this pageant line. So of course to you guys, it makes a lot of sense. But to try to characterize it as just a few Sundays, you're trying to downplay it. Not only that, you're trying to downplay it, but this is where we see when people start making statements, you're trying to now, and I was like, why would they go to the media? Now we understand they could not handle that external criticism. And of course I get it. External criticism is hard, but they couldn't handle the external criticism so much that it wasn't just about going to the media to talk about the investigation and how the police weren't doing their jobs. It was about protecting myself from criticism, because John and Patsy Ramsey see themselves as good people, and they have worked to create a good image in the Colorado community and in the Atlanta community and everywhere they go. So they can't bear for people to be talking about them. People know, it's like you could let it roll off your back and say, man, I don't even know these folks, but for the Ramseys, they're like, man, look, I can't bear to have you guys talk about us like this. So therefore we have to step out and defend ourselves, is essentially what that was about. It really wasn't. And in that respect, it wasn't about finding justice for JonBenet Ramsey. It's about protecting John Ramsey and Patsy Ramsey at that point. That's what I'll say. It's a career. JonBenet began competing by age 4. Pam Paul was indignant over the coverage of her niece. They said she went for French manicures once a week. That's a lie. The night before every pageant, and I was at every single one of them, we would do what we call the pageant scrub, she says. And it was fun in the bathroom. Scrub up the knees, make sure the nails are clean, neat and trimmed. We washed her hair, and Aunt Pam would do the little French manicure, and that was that. Patsy and I did her hair. I'm a channel makeup artist, and that child wore so little makeup because she didn't need it. Paul concedes that JonBenet's hair was lightened, which Patsy always denied. The former nanny says JonBenet's hair was a light golden brown, which suddenly turned to platinum blonde. I said to her, "So, who's dyeing your hair, JonBenet?" She was all goshed. "You're not supposed to say anything about that." I said, "Okay, it will be our little secret." By the way, says Paul proudly, I designed most of her clothes, and they were professionally made, and they are very ladylike. JonBenet won top honors in wardrobing every place we went. I worked with JonBenet on all her music. She had a lovely voice. Now, for Cowboy Sweetheart, she had a little routine that was taught to her by Miss Kit, who was a dance instructor. Patsy designed the Cowboy Sweetheart outfit, and Pam Griffin made it. I designed the black and white channel sports outfit with the little polka dot underskirt. Grigio Griffin and other moms, Tammy Paulson, say that they never saw any signs that JonBenet was not enjoying herself. Others say they had glimpses of a strain on the child. One often told story took place at Pasta J's, a restaurant run by the Ramseys' close friend, Jay Alowski. According to one version, it must have been some kind of dress-up affair or pageantry thing, because JonBenet was all dressed up with the makeup and the gown. She got cold and went up to her mother and said, "Mommy, I'd like to wear my jacket, I'm cold." And Patsy said firmly, "Not now, honey. You're still on display." Mike Glenn. To that point, though, too, when you think about pageantry and how the pageant life goes, it's like modeling, right? It's kind of like modeling because sometimes people who are models, as I know of, as I understand, they will do things for the look. Even though they might be uncomfortable, they might be cold, they'll do things for the look. And they'll say, "Oh, but I got a good picture though. I got a good photo though. I still look good. I look snatched. I look great," in that. And so this is kind of what it would require. So when the other lady was saying that Patsy is in denial, Patsy was not in denial. Patsy was not in denial at all. Patsy was very much in control of what JonBenet was doing. She knew very well what it took to be in this game, what it took to be in the pageant life. She knew very well. That's why she would instruct JonBenet and say, "Hey, you're on display. Hey, you," and essentially what, I take that to mean, hey, there's a certain look that we're trying to go off of. People need to see you as a display. I'm trying to make it sound as, acceptable as possible. You got to understand that people are looking at you. They're watching. They're watching you. And so in this way, if there was ever the case, and like I said, the reason why we're going off this article is because there's a lot of nuggets in it, and we've done some of the homework. I'm not saying that we're done. Definitely want to continue more, but we've done some of the homework to sort of validate what is being said in this article. And so we can be relatively comfortable that what this article is saying is true. If what's being said here is true in terms of JonBenet being on display, then it kind of begs the question of, were you really trying to protect your daughter from outside influences? If we tag along with the intruder theory, and we allow the intruder theory come in, we might say that in this instance, you kind of opened your daughter up to the intruder, who would have wanted to do this. And I don't say that to be harsh. I say that to say that if you intentionally putting your daughter on display, and you use those terms. Um, you have people, and this is the downside of people, right? You have people who will, men and women and children, who will look and say, "Oh, that's so cute. Oh, I love that. What does she do?" And obviously that opens opportunity for Patsy and John to talk about how proud they are of their, daughter. But you also have people who might not say anything, might stand in the back, and might look from far away. So if John and Patsy are really concerned about that, apparently those concerns aren't being manifested in any real way, to the point to where they say, you know what, we are at Pasta J's now, so JonBenet, you don't have to be on display. But in Patsy's mind, I don't care where you are, as long as you're wearing this outfit, you're on display. People are watching you, and we want and I'm the kind of person, I don't really like a lot of attention on me for an extended amount of time. It gets a little uncomfortable. But we see that Patsy is the opposite. Nothing wrong with that. But there are some people that they pull attention intentionally. They go out and they say things, and they if they're not getting enough attention, they'll walk out in the street and just, oh, oh, it's me. And they'll fall to the ground to get that attention. And it seems, nothing wrong with it. It seems like that's kind of how, Patsy is. And so she's training, the proverb says that train up a child in the way they should go. So Patsy is training JonBenet to accept being on display. But when we go back up to the part, and I'll say this and be quiet, when we go back up to the part where it talks about JonBenet not really wanting to perform like that, were there any questions about what JonBenet wanted to do? I know in John's book, The Other Side of Suffering, he mentioned that he had a conversation with JonBenet and the idea of, okay, JonBenet, if you're going to get into this sort of pageant life thing, then you need to focus on your talent and not necessarily anything else. But it was never said, and he stated that JonBenet said, "Okay, Daddy," and ran away to go play with Burke. But it was never said in any capacity at all what JonBenet thought from her own mouth. We can't see what JonBenet thought. And that's why when I look at some of those videos and it seems like JonBenet isn't too thrilled about being there, that's the concern, because she may, legitimately not been thrilled about being there. So that's where I'm coming from. That's a concern, because I know what you guys want is adults. But have you opened up space to ask the child, JonBenet, what she wants? A former divinity student met Ramsey in 1991 when he was the recruiting coordinator for the University of Colorado's football team. He needed someone to donate computer equipment to the school. Jay Alowski introduced Glenn to Ramsey, and the two struck up a close friendship. Ramsey came through with the computers, and in time offered Glenn, who speaks several languages, a position on the international side of his company. With daughters close in age, the Glenns and the Ramseys often socialized. The family was almost make-believe, too perfect. It was like Ozzie and Harriet came to Boulder, says Glenn. But John could get really angry. I saw this on a few occasions involving business. Shouting and threatening, his eyes bulging like you cannot believe. Oh, yeah. It seemed like Jekyll and Hyde. Oh, yeah. In 1992, the Ramseys were blindsided by a series of tragedies. On January 8th, Ramsey's eldest daughter, Elizabeth, was killed in an automobile accident. Ramsey was dead. The face of sternness. Let me show you. If we were to think about that stern face of John, I would think about this one. Because if you look at John and the screaming and the shouting, this is the thing about business. Business brings out the worst in people, brings out the very negative emotions in people. It just does. People like this can be perfectly fine, cool, calm, and collected, but really it's like they're not really cool, calm, and collected. It's a raging storm. If we go back to our videos about John Ramsey, where we kind of discussed his personality and stuff like that, and he made some statements, or he was people said, he seems quiet, but maybe not really, or something like that. And then he was, sort of in different clubs as an executive and whatnot. we can tell from his eyes right here that he's thinking about something very intently. This would probably be the look that you would catch on his face as if you were, at Access Graphics and he was in his office. John doesn't really have a lot of patience for people when he doesn't want to engage with them. When he's in the middle of something, he does not like being interrupted, period. If you interrupt me, it becomes a problem. And now the thing about that, and I get that because, zealous, ambitious, and things of that, and just focused. There are people like that. But if you are John Ramsey and you it's like a dog eating, and you stick your hand in front of that dog, they might bite it off, and if you don't, catch that behavior, and I'm not calling John Ramsey a dog, but what I'm saying is if you don't catch that behavior, if you don't fine tune that behavior to watch how you interact with people, then the result can be screaming and hollering and just taking that rage out on people who stick their hand in the proverbial dog bowl to say, and he snaps it off. So that's when I think about sort of John snapping on people. You catch him in deep thought like this, or you catch him in the middle of something, he will snap on you. Jim Marino sees Elizabeth's death as this watershed event of the Ramsey's life. There was a significant change when she died, he says. He became more introverted. A few months later, Ramsey's father, who had married John's first wife's mother, also died. In the summer of 1993, Patsy was diagnosed with metastasized ovarian cancer. It was stage 4. It was clear up underneath the rib cage, says Pam Paul. Patsy began commuting to the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland for chemotherapy, and she took Taxol. I took John aside and I said, "You really need to do everything you can to help her," recalls Mike Lind. He needed to be reminded, and he did take some time off and traveled with her. Judith Phillips was distressed to learn that her very ill friend was flying back and forth across the country by herself, sick as a dog, vomiting. Where the heck was John? In 1995, the cancer went into remission. She was healed of God, claims Pam, because she had cancer one day and not the next. Patsy's illness, according to one knowledgeable insider, was complicated by the fact that implants from a breast augmentation early in her marriage ruptured and needed additional surgery. Following her recovery, she celebrated by having a partial facelift. On the morning of December 26th, Patsy Ramsey phoned her mother in Atlanta. Immediately, Pam, Polly, and Polly's husband flew to Boulder. After the discovery of the body, Patsy declared to her friends that she would never go back to that house again. In the first days, the Ramseys and the Paul sisters moved into John and Barbara Fernie's place in South Boulder. Another friend, Patty Novak, who is a registered nurse, stayed nights with Patsy. Patsy was completely devastated, says Novak. She needed to be taken into the shower and assisted in the bathroom. While Patsy wept, John paced. Yeah. The first night he was completely paced. I was going to ask, where's John? Why is John not? Because, it's been said that John, not only is John not a PDA person, but John is not affectionate at all. And said he probably got some of that from his father. But like, man, in this case, John is leaving Patsy to fly across the country to deal with her own cancer. I know he painted a picture of him being the perfect supportive husband. In his, he starts at the point to where they went to Maryland and he was there with her every step of the way and going to Annapolis. And I've been to Bethesda, I've been to Annapolis, so I know exactly what he's talking about, and whatnot, and stuff like that. So it's just like the way he paints it in his book, The Other Side of Suffering. He makes it seem like he was there every step of the way. But according to this, somebody had to light a fire under him because he's working as, he's like, okay, well, you got it, babe. And he's the kind of, well, okay, babe, do you got it? Okay, well, I really need to get to business because I got to run this company. And people can get like that. They can, become super hyper focused on running the business rather than, paying attention to family. And that's unfortunate. Which would go to, I've heard something in terms of, it's not official, of JonBenet being, sad that her dad was gone a lot of times. And so this would kind of go to that narrative. Dad's not around. I miss him. Pacing, says Novak. And I had to wake up his brother Jeff because I needed to keep an eye on John. The first night, Patsy slept on a futon and John must have slept on a couch. They pretty much did not sleep. On December 28th, with their lawyers present, the Ramsey gave hair and blood samples and were fingerprinted. She was a wreck, says one source. As she was being fingerprinted, she became hysterical, saying, "Why are you doing this? Do you think I killed my baby?" In June, Patsy Ramsey, who was heavily medicated after her daughter's death, told friends that she could not remember anything. Not the murder night, the days after, nothing. Investigators began to worry about an amnesia defense. Others recalled her emotionally charged remark during the Ramseys' May 1st press conference that it won't be long before she sees JonBenet again. On December 29th, the family flew to Marietta, Georgia in a private jet piloted by John Ramsey for JonBenet's funeral. Among those who went there to comfort the Ramseys that first week were Fleet and Priscilla White. Soon, however, questions and doubts began to nag at the Whites. Fleet White phoned the Paul house and said he wanted to come by, speak with John. When the Whites arrived, they were led into the sunroom, where Ramsey, his brother Jeff, and Don Paul were waiting. According to an insider, Ramsey sat down next to Priscilla and began to pat her arm as if to calm her down, as her husband pelted him with questions. "Why do you need all these attorneys? Why aren't you cooperating with the police?" His distress mounting, he declared, "I don't understand what you are doing." Priscilla later told friends that she had told John that going on CNN was a big mistake. Nigel would later tell police that White was a wild man and a lunatic. Ramsey would inform friends that the worm had turned. According to a DA source, Ramsey told his lawyers and the DA that he regarded Fleet White, whom he had often identified as his best friend, as a prime suspect in JonBenet's murder. In the ensuing weeks, the Ramsey team spread the word that so when I come over and get on your case, when I come over and get on your case and hold you accountable, when I come to hold you accountable, when I come to hold you accountable, all of a sudden, see, this is the thing. Fleet White didn't even know that he was under. I don't think any of the friends knew they were under a loyalty test. I don't think they knew that. Had they known that they were under some sort of loyalty test where it's like John and Patsy are watching, I'm watching you. You don't even know I'm watching you, but I've been watching you a long time. My brother used to say that all the time. It's like, you don't even know I'm watching you, but I've been watching you for 10 minutes. I've been watching you for 15 minutes and I watch you go all the way around the room. They're under a loyalty test and don't even know it. Didn't even know it. So Fleet, when you come over here yapping your gums and bumping your gums, Judith, you come over here with the riff and the rap. The Ramseys are just crossing you off. Unloyal. Unloyal. You try to call them later after you think that you've kind of talked some sense into them and they don't pick up the phone. Or you're blocked, or you can't get in contact, or some lawyers are running interference. Why? Because you flunked the loyalty test. So essentially, Fleet goes over there, guns blazing on the 28th, something like that, and says, "Why are you guys doing this? Why are you guys not cooperating?" 28, 27, something like 27, 28, something like that. Why are you guys not? So that this is the first point where we see that Fleet and John are having a problem, and we can already see like, yo, I mean, you're acting funny, John. Like you need to. Don't you think you need to cooperate, please? And if I can refer you to Fleet and Priscilla White's letter, they said that the Ramseys didn't cooperate for like 3 or 4 months. Steve Thomas, in his letter to the governor, said the same thing. Hey, these guys didn't come in for like 3 or 4 months to really cooperate. So they may have come in and given samples and stuff like that, but to sit down and really cooperate, because they had to get to JonBenét's funeral. And so Fleet is probably like, man, we can't really talk much about it now. 29th is coming up. We need to get the body over. 29th is coming up. We need to get the body over. We need to get prepared for, and we need to get the body. We need to get prepared for the funeral, all such as that. But we're going to talk about this. And so probably what struck Fleet is when he got to the funeral and there was some sort of like acting, and he was like, what is this bull crap? And if he knows John and Patsy Ramsey and he sees them acting and being like, oh, please, I can't take it anymore. It's possible that he saw, and I'm speculating, it's possible that he looked up and he saw Burke playing with toys on the front row or something like that. And just incensed, can imagine Daphne and Fleet the Third just kind of sitting back there, just paying their respects, just in respect, to JonBenet. They know their friend is dead. And so they're just kind of sitting there. And then, it's possible that, Burke is up there smiling. I don't know if he is. I'm not saying he is, but, based on the video or the picture with him in the CU Buffs that's available on the internet, he was in a CU Buffs jacket. It looked like he wasn't really worried. Now, I don't know that, if he were here today, he would say, oh, I was supremely worried. So I have to speculate on that. But, Fleet was probably just, my point is that Fleet was probably just incensed at the kind of way that things seem to have been handled. And, seeing Patsy and John seem concerned while he knows that they're not talking to the cops could have just really sent him over the edge. So I want to real quickly show what pictures I was talking about in case it was confusing, or in case someone didn't know what I was referring to. And so in this one, obviously we can see he's in the CU Buffs football. And depending on that, it could have been John Andrews' jacket because John Andrews was going to that college. But here, we can see Burke is smiling. And I guess, the thing about that is, at some point you become concerned a little bit as to the consistency of what he's saying. At what point in time do you tend to like really believe? You know what I mean? I know he's a child, but it's like, at what point in time do you tend to believe that he really, is not concerned with JonBenet just based off his statements at Dr. Phil and based on his statements in the psychologist's room and with, I think, Commander Eller, just the consistency of his statements. Drawing a picture, JonBenet's not included, jumping on Dr. Phil's show and essentially when Dr. Phil asked him why he didn't draw JonBenet, and he had an opportunity to kind of reflect as a 29-year-old man, I think. He had an opportunity to reflect, and his reflection on the Dr. Phil show was essentially, she wasn't there. He said, I don't know why. I don't know why I didn't draw her. He said, but as far as I'm aware, she wasn't there, so I didn't draw her. And I was just like, and then here, what are we smiling about? I don't know. Like, okay, it's not a smile, it's a smirk. What are we smirking about? Well, he's a kid, he's, whatever. He's 9, about 9 at this point. He's still 9. So it's just like, for him to have grasped the gravity of the situation, I guess what's weird to me is for him to have stated that, he grasped the gravity of the situation. And he said, when Dad told me JonBenet went to heaven now, I just started crying when he was over at Fleet White's house. And I was like, this is the ultimate, this is the funeral. And a lot of times I know people hold, they hold their emotions until the funeral and well, they don't hold them, but they have, sort of less aggressive or less intense and less intense emotions prior to the funeral, maybe. But, and they're still crying, they're still weeping, they're still sort of just people being distraught. But when you get to the funeral, it's just, it just, trail of tears, just, and you're just overwhelmed. And he's smiling, he's smirking. So that's it's a little disturbing to me, not gonna lie. So the whites were not to be trusted. Pam Griffin was also among those who carried the message. This man has a dark side, she told me over the phone. Pressed to explain how Fleet White could have possibly killed JonBenet, she said, I don't think Fleet White with his 2 hands murdered that child. I just think he knows something. Right. The whites declined to comment for this story. The whites were the first of what police have come to call the throwaway friends. Anyone suspected of the vaguest disloyalty to the Ramseys soon showed up on a list they gave to police. Ramsey panicked, started throwing all his friends under the bus, says radio host Peter Boyles. Beginning with his best friend, Jeff Merrick, Mike Glenn, Jim Marino, were all horrified to learn that Ramsey had placed them on a suspect list. All of them were questioned by detectives and asked to give blood and hair samples. Later, they learned that Haddon's team had identified them to police as disgruntled former employees. Access employees were told that anyone who spoke with the press or the police without permission would be fired. And the thing about the employees being disgruntled is crazy, because Jim Marino, when he was on the Geraldo Rivera show, which we watched, and it's kind of hard to find. You can find it, but it's kind of hard to find. But when we reviewed it, essentially what he was saying was he kind of felt disrespected. Said, "Hey man, like you threw me under the bus. Yeah, I don't understand what I had to do with anything." And so you have people here who are willing, and then subsequently went on to stand up for John. So you have people here who are willing to stand up for you, even though, based off of what you've done for them, giving me money, helping me get on my feet, supporting a fundraiser that I was doing. I think Jim Marino said, and so he said, I don't know why John did this, but it did make me frustrated. One of the detectives, without permission, would be fired. And so I guess to also add to that point, to call these people, and he's standing up for John, anybody, I don't understand, I really don't. How are we characterizing these individuals? Help me out. Jim Marino is distraught. He didn't say a word negatively against John. He said, John, if you go back and you're able to find, if you watch one of my video with the Geraldo Rivera interview, or you go back and find the Geraldo Rivera interview yourself, it's on the web. Like I said, it's tough to find, but it's possible with enough sleuthing. But if you and I think you have to type in something to the effect of Geraldo Rivera visual icon or something like that. And you're looking for a specific episode, I think in September or something like that. I think it's like September 23rd or 24th or something like that of 97 or 98. It's one or two. I think it's 97, but you're looking for an episode of 90, in September of 97, I think. But anyways, you're calling these individuals distraught, and it's just like, they're like, no, man, I'm not distraught. I don't understand why you named me in something that I had nothing to do with. I was completely detached. I'm not even in the inner circle like that. So how did I get bought into this? And I understand if you're put on a suspect list, it's like, oh, the cops are required to look at all those suspects and rule them out, because if not, the cops didn't do their job. Man, come on with that. Because if somebody right now, like, if you got a call right now and somebody put you on a suspect list and man, come on, me and this guy we've never had any, negative words. We've never had any problems. It's been all love between us. And then all of a sudden they call you up and you're on a suspect list, not because the cops said we need to look at you and the cops were doing some sleuthing. He's on a suspect list because John put him on the suspect list, and then turned around and called him distraught. what? How am I distraught? Like there's a constant like barrage of negativity. Like we got to stop for a second and think about that. There's a constant barrage of negativity thrown toward these people. Oh, Jane Scobie, you're distraught. You're you're a bitter ex-employee of John. You didn't like that John did whatever. And Jane was like, no, I have another job. I'm genuinely here to see justice come through for JonBenet. Like I'm not in that mode of being negative at all. But if you say anything, if you show up at any way, oh, they're distraught, they don't like us. And it's like, based on what? And that's what I'm saying, man. The fact that you can just like accuse anyone of anything at any time for any reason, baseless. Just go look at these people. Based on what? Oh, if you don't look at them, then you didn't do your due diligence. How? There's nothing behind this. If we ask this dude a couple questions and it's like followed up, did due diligence, I don't understand how that's, you know what I mean? Like, I don't understand why we should be, this becomes at some point a wild goose chase. Like, I should not be paying attention to these people. I shouldn't. You're mad because I won't go over there after I know after a while it's just bull crap. I'm not going over there. You've cried wolf too many times. I'm not going over there. That's fair. When are we going to give the cops a break on that? Hey, man, you can't just come up here for all we know. You could have went and bought a sales list. You know what I mean? You could have went and bought a leads list. You know what I mean? For real estate and came back and said, hey, look, I've sat down and put together a list of people that I went to sales class with, that I went to training with, and I've trained. And here's another 1,000 names that I think we should look at. And at some point, you got to look at that list and be like, this is the local sales list from. This is local leads list from so-and-so.com. I'm not looking at this. Well, if you don't look at it, then I'm not looking at that because it's bullcrap, man. Come on. One of the detectives, Steve Thomas, told me to come in and asked me point blank if I killed her, says Merrick, still fuming. I have no doubt that Ramsey tried to set me up. Mm-hmm. The specific question the police kept asking me was, why does John Ramsey keep throwing your name out? They asked me to take a polygraph. I said, sure, no problem. As soon as John Ramsey takes one. Early in 1996, Ramsey had decided that he wanted to get rid of Merrick. Mm-hmm. Merrick was shifted to another job, which was soon eliminated. In Atlanta, probably. When Merrick confronted Ramsey, his friend of 25 years told him that he was powerless to help him. Merrick filed a complaint with Lockheed Martin, which later prompted the Ramsey team to put him on another suspect list. Jane Scobie was not surprised that Ramsey had gone from defending himself to accusing his friends. She was familiar with the strategy. I knew those people were bad news. We called it the evil empire for a reason. Marino and Glenn had much softer landings. They were moved around the company to positions that either overtaxed them or made them unhappy enough to quit. Both of them, as well as Merrick, went on to better, higher paid jobs. Glenn and Marino left on fairly good terms. Both immediately phoned Ramsey after the murder to offer their condolences. He was my best friend for a lot of years, says Marino, with difficulty. That's what hurt me the most. He indicated that Mike and Jeff were his enemies, and I can tell you, they never were. I was contacted by the Boulder police about 2 weeks later, wanting to talk to me about where I was on the night of the murder, says Mike Glenn, who now lives in Tucson. They said my name had been mentioned by Ramsey's attorney as someone they needed to check out. I was pretty dumbfounded. In February and March, Glenn says, his family was tormented by 3 weeks of media constantly bombarding. His neighbors were interviewed by TV crews. One even asked, according to Glenn, do you know the Ramsey family considers him to be a major suspect in the murder of their daughter? In April, after 2 visits from a private investigator named John Foster, who said he worked for the Ramseys, Glenn called a Boulder detective to find out why the PI was snooping around. He learned that virtually everyone the police had interviewed got a visit soon after by one of Ramsey's personal sleuths. I said, why are they doing? That's crazy, man. That's crazy. Can you imagine taking the trash out here in the back of your house? Just doing a routine, taking the trash out, or going to check the mail in front of your home. You know what I mean? And you're chilling. It's a nice sunny day. And like, you notice this car, like kind of driving real slow past you. And you're like, man, that's weird. Shrug it off. Go out to check the mail in the front. It's taking out the trash in the back. Go out to check the mail in the front. And that same car is like sitting out front. It's like, hey, do they have family here? I've never seen that car. Do they have family here? Or, you know, I'm not trying to be that person, you know, but do they have family here or something like that? Or, I don't mean, I just want to know that you're not watching me. And like, this dude gets out the car and he's like looking dead at you. What's going on, man? Now, I mean, I wasn't going to say anything, but now I got to reach out to you and talk to you. What's going on? Can I help you with something? Oh no, man, I'm just kind of looking around the neighborhood. And why are you looking at me? Mike Lynn, who now lives in Tucson, had somebody rolling up on him, man. How? I live in Tucson. I'm not even in Colorado. How did I get in it? Oh, man. Doing that. And the police said, to obscure the truth, Foster must have told me 6 times that John didn't give my name to the police. However, detectives told Glenn that Ramsey had given his name almost immediately. Foster explained that the Ramseys had formed a team to try to solve this murder. You know, the police are a small town operation. They don't know what they're doing, but they're not willing to take any kind of help. Foster continued to pester Glenn, trying to learn what he had told police. After 40 minutes, Glenn told him to leave. Foster declined to comment for this story. Judith Phillips, who last saw Patsy in March, says, I was still a true blue supporter of her. According to Phillips, Patsy asked her to contact Leslie Durgan, Bowler's mayor, and a pile of Phillips. Durgan, who describes Patsy as barely an acquaintance, was surprised at the message Phillips conveyed from her. Why aren't you protecting me? Durgan tersely replied via Phillips, we're doing everything we can. I'm supporting the police. Weeks later, Phillips says she learned that she too had flunked the loyalty test. In April, one of Patsy's close friends phoned her to say that the Ramseys never wanted to see me again. I was not their friend. Even Barbara Fernie, according to friends, began to have doubts. For months, she and Patsy had been inseparable, shopping, lunching, chatting on the phone. By early spring, Fernie began telling people, I am the one doing the grieving. Something is wrong with Patsy. Soon, if you notice the consistency here, Fernie is saying, man, something's wrong, man. I'm doing the grieving. You know, this is not unlike when Judith Phillips wrote her letter, which we reviewed. She wrote her letter to, I think, the mayor. And at the very end of her letter, she mentioned that, hey, you know, my daughter couldn't sleep. You know, I think it was like for 3 months, you know, because we're grieving over this. And I think, obviously, as we know, Fleet White is like, hey, man, we're up here answering questions with the cops. Where y'all at? I'm up here in the interview room, in the interrogation room with the cops. And I come out and I'm looking. And I'm like, where's John and Patsy? Because, and you got to know how that feels, because if I come out and I'm like, where the heck are John and Patsy? Why am I in here answering questions? You're going to feel a type of way about that. Why am I in here answering questions about John and Patsy Ramsey? This is your daughter. This ain't got nothing to do with me, really. Matter of fact, I wasn't even here. That's the theory. I wasn't even here. I had nothing to do with this. Why am I trying to defend you, like just based on like random ideas that I'm coming up with in my head? Why am I trying to defend you based on that? That doesn't make sense. You need to be here with me, talking to me. So again, like when we look at what some of the friends are saying, the friends are saying, hey man, look, I'm grieving more than these guys, and I don't understand that. Friends say Barbara was dropped from the Ramsey inner circle, though her husband, John, has continued his relationship with Ramsey, as have many other business associates. One by one, many of the Ramseys' bolder friends quietly slipped away. However, as more and more of these friends lost faith in them, the DA's team seemed to work more and more closely with Haddon's team. They openly began to give credence to the intruder theory promoted in Haddon's office. Detectives would sit numbly as Hofstrom dismissed their carefully collected evidence, and Lou Smith offered the theory that a grown man had sneaked in through a broken window so narrow that even Hunter discounted the possibility. No one came through that window, he told me in June. But by July, the Haddon team had convinced Hofstrom, DeMuth, and Smith that it was possible. I've talked to Alex a great deal, Pamela Griffin told me, and he has some. This is my next question. Why are the cops having consistent conversations with the lawyers? Why is that happening? Why are the cops having consistent conversations with the lawyers to where that there's enough for, like, I can understand just giving updates like, hey, this is where we are in the investigation, so on and so forth. But why are we like sitting here shooting the breeze? Why are we shooting the breeze? That's my I'm lost on that. We're sitting here shooting the breeze to where you can give me a theory, I can give you a theory, and you can correct my theory, and you can say, hey, did you ever think of this theory? And it's just like, we're trying to follow the evidence. Like, I don't have time for your theory because the cops have all the evidence. But if you as a cop give the evidence to the lawyers, then the lawyers can look at it and they can spin it all around and say, well, this is what we think could possibly happen. I'm not interested in what could have possibly happened. I'm interested in what did happen, because we can come up with thousands of scenarios of what could have possibly happened to JonBenet. Not interested in that because that's not going to solve the case. I'm interested in what did happen. Point blank, period. Everything else is foolishness. Some people working on the case who have called me, and they do not think the Ramseys did it. Pam Paul told me in June, the fact that the district attorney is working with Patsy and John's team is enough to tell the world that they are off the hook. If I thought you did it and I was the police or the DA, would I be working on a daily basis with your hired lawyers and investigators, telling you what I know and them telling me what they know so I could turn around and arrest you? No, because I could never convict you. End of part 4. Telling you what I know, them telling me what they know, because then they could never convict me. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There would be no conviction. Yeah, because we're exchanging informations. Like, we're exchanging information, and when we're giving each other information about the case, then guess what? They're constantly, and then you have a camera in the house, as Detective Steve Thomas said in his report. As long as I continue to give you physical evidence, and I continue to give the information that we have, then you're always going to continue to spin the theory. All the details I'm giving you, you're going to continue to spin the theory and be like, okay, give me what you have next. When you go in there, we see you, we're watching you, but we want to know what you took back. We want to know what you're writing about it, what you're analyzing about it. Give us the physical evidence. Give us the written evidence. Give us everything that you picked up, that you collected. Because from there, we can try to do all that and figure that out. And that's what I'm saying. That's what's weird. But anyways, that's the video. Let me know what you think. Like, share, subscribe, comment. And until next video, take it easy.